Hey everyone, exciting show for you today. It is Thursday morning, and that means in our expert series, we bring back Jonathon Twomley. How you doing, sir?
I'm well. How are you, Michael?
I'm doing very well. Let's real quick hit your Saturday session. How'd it go? Did you enjoy it? Did you learn anything?
Yeah, the Saturday session was really interesting. One of the sort of unexpected turns that the event took, pretty much with every speaker, was talking about how the the COVID crisis is accelerating technological change in real estate that was already underway, but was being adopted slowly because there weren't any pressures to adopt it other than just sometimes it made good financial sense to do it.
Hmm.
But a lot of sort of whatever industry that there is, things like virtual touring, touchless, contactless um, signing, online lease signing, just you name it.
Right.
Pretty much everybody is now moving towards adopting this technology, and a lot of these things were in the works already, but people weren't necessarily being forced to do it. But now that they have been forced to do it, they're like, hey, this is actually a better way of doing business. So for instance, rather than, if you can show people apartments online
Hmm.
and have a whole online appointment system and whatever, you can have essentially coverage for your leasing office 24 hours a day,
Mm.
which
Yeah.
wasn't possible before. But now what you can do is, if you set up a virtual leasing system, you could have someone sign a lease without even seeing the apartment in
Yep.
theory, right? And
Yeah.
say, for instance, and this is going to be, once things get unlocked again, this is going to be quite helpful for, say, that person who lives in California and gets transferred to Texas
Right.
and needs to find an apartment, and they don't have to fly to Texas now and stay in a hotel
Yeah.
and run around looking for apartments. They could literally get online and do their whole application online, see the apartment online, uh, you know, check out the neighborhood by Google, on Google Earth and Google Street View, and basically have an apartment to go to when they go there,
Mm.
which couldn't do that before.
Yeah.
So things like that, or just having the whole leasing process, even if people do come in and look at apartments, you know, uh, uh, in person, the whole leasing process can happen online. There's no paper. It's all, and everything is stored. There's no,
Right.
papers going missing, no messy lease files, none of that stuff.
Yep.
So this is all going to become like, none of the technological changes that people talked about did they say, oh, this is something we're going to stop doing after COVID goes away. It's
Yeah.
all basically going to become industry standard,
Sure.
because almost all these things are good. It makes sense. If you've got like keyless lock systems
Yep.
for your asset, whether it's uh, multifamily or something else, you can actually schedule. You can have people schedule a viewing online, have them download it on their phone. Go and do the keyless lock, let themselves in, look
Yep.
around. You can take a credit card for a damaged deposit, right? You can
Yep.
do all the stuff online. So you don't actually even need to have somebody show them the apartment, and you know that means that people can come in at different hours to see it.
Yep.
If you have, it's great really for, especially for smaller apartments where you just couldn't afford to have a full-time leasing agent,
Right.
right? Maybe you're going to have a leasing agent there 1 or 2 days a week. Well, you've got people coming by the rest of the week who want to see an apartment, and they'll just keep on going if there's no leasing agent
Yeah. They just
there.
go somewhere else. Exactly. Yeah.
Now you can get some of that traffic. So I think we're going to see a lot of interesting and good things happening to the industry when this is all said and done. So that was one really interesting takeaway that was across the board. The other was just seeing how people are dealing with the COVID crisis.
Yep.
For instance, with people have enacted, protocols about, what do they do with work orders? They're logging all the work orders and tracking them, but they're only performing the real life and safety issues, right?
Okay.
And they're also, making sure that when they go in, if they have to go in, the tenant is not there. the tenants should be out of the apartment, so they're not in the apartment at the same time. They're wiping everything down.
Yeah.
If they have a tenant that has tested positive, what do? They've for privacy reasons they can't tell other neighbors, but that person is asked to self quarantine, and everything is done on the phone and online. I don't know what happens if you have a tenant with COVID and then you have to do a life and safety emergency repair that probably requires some like hazmat suits or something.
Exactly.
But anyway, it was a very, very interesting conference. And, if you join Multifamily Launchpad, you get that at all the past conferences for free as part of your membership. So if you are still interested in seeing those videos, the price of a monthly membership is the same as the event itself costs. So basically you get everything for the cost of what the event was if you join.
Very cool. Yeah. Well, I look forward to watching the videos. I was unable to make them given a family event that happened that day. So again, anytime you can listen to 6 experts for less than $100, it's well worth it. And then you get all the others from Multifamily Launchpad. You're doing your viewers a service. So I appreciate you. It is Thursday. So that means unemployment. We got to go there next, right? Unemployment claims 16th week in a row, over 1 million. We can't accept that as okay, right? The peak of the last crisis was 606. And we're now 16 weeks into this, over 7 figures. Continuing claims down to 17 and change. What'd you see in those numbers? What do you think?
Hey, I lost you.
We had a little bit of a 10-second hiccup there. So let me ask you again. So unemployment came in 16th week, over 1 million. Continuing claims 17.3, I think. What are you seeing in those numbers? What are you seeing in those numbers?
Obviously, I mean, we've just become used to unemployment claims of over 1 million, and
that's not okay.
And we're thinking, oh well, last week it was 1.6, now it's 1.3, so that's great, and we've become so immune to what this data really means. I guess the obviously we do want the trend to continue to go down. That's the direction that we hope for it to go. The little thing in the data this week that's slightly concerning, maybe it'll turn out to be noise, maybe it's something else, but it is something, is that the new continuing claims are only 10,000 less than the week before.
Right.
So the trend of declining claims could be slowing. And frankly, this is what you would expect to see with a bunch of states now reimposing lockdowns, right? So it's going to take a couple of weeks for this to filter through in the data because, it takes people file for unemployment. It may take them a few days before they actually file. Then it takes a couple, maybe another week for it to be registered and for it to hit the data. So this could be the early leading indicator. We hopefully won't, but we could see next week a rise again in the weekly claims data. And that obviously wouldn't be good. And you combine that with the fact, there's a very interesting article, I don't know if you want to pull that up now.
Sure.
Now's the time. There's a very interesting article on Seeking Alpha yesterday about how the unemployment data is very difficult to get your head around right now. Can you just lower it just like a smidgen to show the the title?
Title.
So the unemployment data is very slippery at the moment. Because will they let you close that bottom thing that says you're not?
No, I tried.
They won't let you. Okay, this is good. This shows it. So, so one of the points that this article is making is that the unemployment claims are very, very. The pandemic is making just a big mess of the unemployment claims, because typically, what the definition of unemployed is out of work looking for work, right? And if you're out of work and not looking for work, you don't get counted. But what happens when, like now, you're out of work, but you're expecting to go back to your job, so you're not looking for another job, right? That is counted, maybe not counted, maybe partially counted. So those are data points that we don't have in this number of like 11 million
Yeah.
sorry, 1.1 million, sorry, 11.1% unemployment.
Yeah.
I'll get that right eventually. We're not necessarily, we don't really know how much of the real number is captured there.
Yeah.
And there seems to
let's level set, because you and I know this chart. We know this. I'm not going to be convinced that everybody looking at this chart knows what it says.
Yes, so I'm not getting into the chart yet. I'm just still talking about
I'm sorry.
The lead up to it. So that's one thing. That's one thing that we don't really know. So maybe the numbers are likely worse than they really are. And the thing that this author was saying in this article is that in addition, gosh, I lost my train of thought. So the numbers are worse could be worse than they are. But in addition, who knows? I lost the point. It'll come back to me.
Yeah, well, I think where I think you were going is you were correctly pointing out that these numbers are bad, but they could be far worse, because there are a set of people who have been furloughed but expect to go back, which would not be counted in the national survey.
Well, that's one thing. Yeah, there's independent contractors who are out of work. There's all kinds of other people who are not captured by the data. But there was actually another point I wanted to make. But anyway, I'll skip it and come back to that if I remember. So the importance of this chart, though, is what he was talking about is if you look at the blue line is the 2007 recession. Mm-hmm. And it took 6 years from the trough, from the bottom, mm-hmm. for employment to return to where it started at the beginning. Right. Yeah. So that's a 6-year trajectory and that was, really that was the worst post-World War II recession. Now, if you look at what we've got going on right now, it's far worse than that. Now, the data here shows V-shape so far, and which makes absolutely sense. And you and I have been talking about this for a long time. Mm-hmm. When the recession is caused by everything shutting down, then as soon as everything opens up, it's a lot of people are going to be, that V is going to be very sharp.
Yep.
The problem is that we know, but we can't yet quantify, is what's been the collateral damage from the recession? What are the businesses that have closed? What does that account for?
Yeah.
Where does the V go all the way back up to that 0.0 at the top, like in a year? A lot of people are hoping so, and a lot of people are believe it will, but it's unlikely because we know that there's been some collateral damage. So the real question is, where does the V stop, and then what's the trajectory like after that? And if it stops, and I think the implicit argument in this article is, if it stops somewhere around, say, -6%, where the 2007 recession happened, then we should expect another 6-year climb back to zero.
Yeah.
And
wow.
That's the argument. And one other thing that I think we should think about in that is, this is again counting unemployment, so it implies that people are looking for work.
Correct.
Right. We are now 13 years later than 2007.
Yeah.
Meaning that a huge chunk of baby boomers have retired, right? Yeah. And if they haven't retired, they're 13 years older, right? Yeah. So the oldest baby boomers this year, are 64. Sorry, the youngest baby boomers are 64.
Okay.
Wait, no, take that back. I'm getting all mixed up. The oldest, oh God, I can't freaking do math anymore. Okay.
The youngest are 64.
No, that's wrong.
Really?
The leading edge, the leading edge of the baby boomers is now 74. I'm sorry.
74. Okay.
The leading edge, the oldest baby boomers are now 74, and the youngest are 1965 are 55. 55. Right. Yeah. But basically, you think about that whole 13-year difference over time, right? So that means that the first now 10 years of the baby boom are all retirement age or older, and so about half of them. Right. Whereas in 2007, none of them were retirement age. Right.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, that caused a lot of early retirements too.
Sure did.
The recession. Right. I mean, even though people couldn't, their 401ks and stuff were toast. A lot of people just like threw in the towel and they're like, forget it, I'm not working anymore.
Yeah.
I'm just going on early Social Security and I'm gonna make the best of it.
Right.
And a lot of those people were pulled back into the workforce eventually because there was such demand for jobs, and I think a lot of people went back part-time.
Yeah.
But there aren't going to be a whole lot of 65-year-olds who are going to, I just think this is it's going to cause more people to retire, frankly, if they,
I think
so,
I mean, just looking at the structure of employment. Yeah.
So I just think like overall economic activity is going to be down when the V is over.
Yeah.
Like when we come out of the V part of this,
yep.
There's no way in hell that the V is going all the way back up to zero.
No, there's no chance. Come on. That's just not, that doesn't make any I mean, you can't even, there's no chance. There's no chance.
It may not be look out below, but I mean, it's definitely, I think people should be for a long slog.
There's two things when I look at this chart that I think of. One on both of them are, oh my God. So let's do this one first. If I understand the colors on the chart, the blue line obviously is 2007. The next color going right to left is 2001. And then the next one is 1990. So when I look at that, I go, we have a trend, actually all the way back to number 4, which is 1981. Every subsequent recession, the getting back to even unemployment has taken longer.
Yes.
That does not make you feel warm and fuzzy.
Yeah, that is an interesting point, and that reflects the financialization of the economy and the fact that these recessions are not caused by the business cycle anymore. They're caused by debt crises.
Interesting.
Right? So you look at like 2007, it's a debt crisis. 2001, that's a stock market crash.
Yeah, .com-ish.
That caused that .com crash, and then 1990, that's probably more mixed.
Yeah,
the economy wasn't as financialized, but you're right. The trend is that each subsequent recession pretty much, takes longer and longer to solve because we have to dig ourselves out of the debt, right? That and deleverage, because people are deleveraging basically.
Yeah,
right?
Of course.
Saving money to pay off debt, and it's not just corporate debt, but it's personal debt. People have more access to credit, right? And so that causes bigger and longer booms, but it also causes worse recessions. And, if you look at those earlier recessions, like, through probably the 60s, maybe into the 70s, the 74 recession was the oil shock.
Oil shock,
right?
Yep.
But the before that, the recessions tended to be the typical
business cycle,
Yeah, people buy, and then they have everything that they need, and they don't need another stove for 5 more years, right? And so there's like all the pent up demand is satisfied, and then you have a recession, and until pent up demand builds up, and so that would happen rather quickly. Within a few months, you'd have enough people who need new stoves and cars and stuff, and they would go and start buying stuff again. But what's happened? But they didn't have to dig themselves out of debt, and the corporations did either, and the government didn't either.
Yeah.
So,
the other thing that I see on this chart that I think we should at least acknowledge, again, kind of flipping the coin over and maybe look for a little bit of a sliver of hope, is getting back to zero is an interesting discussion in apples to apples comparison. But when you look at absolute values, I think this is true for the last couple. I don't know the others. Meaning, like the unemployment basis for 2007 was about 6%. Right. The unemployment basis for 2020 was 3.5%. Right. The unemployment for 2001 was probably 6.5. Maybe it was sub 7. Probably. I guess what I'm saying is you start the down trough. The last couple have always been a smaller number. So, logically saying getting back to 3.5 is going to take longer than getting back to 6 is, I guess, what I'm saying.
Oh yeah, the definition. Yeah, I mean, full employment has changed. Right?
Correct.
But there's also some, like with everything else, with all statistics, there's some like noise or uncertainty in the data.
Sure.
Right. And one of the things that I was reading about before COVID was, well, what does this 3.5% number really mean? And there was some, speculation. It was more than speculation. People were looking at data and trying to understand this.
Yep.
And there was some interpretations of the data that said, well, this is actually double counting a lot of people who have two jobs to make ends meet.
Oh, wow.
And and it's also, or it's also counting all these people who are really underemployed. They have jobs, but they don't have,
Yeah, the underemployed for sure.
they don't have jobs that meet their needs. So they're not, they're underemployed. They're only working 20 hours a week or what have you. It's not full, because the unemployment data is not restricted to full-time jobs, right? So because they're looking at the data and going, why is it that we have such low unemployment and we also have such low economic growth and no inflation? Like, how can you have 3.5% unemployment and not have any inflation?
Yeah.
Or very little inflation. And the thinking, well, maybe it's because people are employed, but they're not working.
Yeah.
They're underemployed, or this is double counting people who have two part-time jobs or three part-time jobs.
That'd be interesting.
So, because obviously in a country of 320 million people, it's hard to get all the accurate data. So it's all done by sampling, and
for sure,
and different reports that are sometimes kind of conflicting with each other. So it's kind of really more is. So again, I take all this with a grain of salt. I think it's always wise for investors to downplay good news a little bit, and take the bad news seriously. But there's a point which sentiment is going to. I think there's still a lot of optimism in the market because, look at what the stock market's doing. It's nuts. But there's a lot of optimism in the market, I think, because people are generally optimistic and hopeful, right? And they're hoping, and they're looking around and going, well, it's the damn government that shut everything down. So once the government lets everything go back to work, we'll all be fine again. Yeah. And that's a little dangerous if you're thinking about making investment decisions on that basis.
Right.
But on the other hand, once that passes and people are really like, oh my goodness, this is really terrible. Like, we're all going to die. Like that's the point at which, as an investor, you should be going, this is about to get interesting.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And that's actually where I wanted to take this as we wrap up this week's conversation is, I think the Fed, the Treasury, the government, whoever you want to call those mass entities working together, has successfully created this environment where we feel better July 16th than we did in March. Asset prices are up. Stocks, real estate, at least residential, is flying off the shelves. Bidding wars are happening. Builders, just today, builder confidence is at 72, which is up from 30, which is, oh, by the way, the same number as March, right? So we have these juices, right? People are feeling better, but I'm sitting here going, I see pain. The pain has to be paid at some point. And I'm getting nervous. And again, I don't know if it's the second half or they're so good at it, they're going to delay it to 2021. I don't know.
Well, a lot depends on what happens with this additional stimulus package, right?
That's
we
true.
know that the unemployment benefits are running out this month. Basically, people are going to get one, maybe two more paychecks.
Two.
With the stimulus, and then it's up to Congress. There's going to be a gap because they're not going to enact it. Even if they do enact it by the 31st, it's going to take a couple of weeks for things to get implemented, and there'll be a gap. But I guarantee you, the $600 a week is going to go away. Agreed. It's going to be replaced by something else.
Some kind of cap.
That's going to have an impact, right? That is going to have an impact, and but you're right. I mean, they do try to kick the can down the road. They do try to defer the pain. And the other thing about some of the stuff that you talk about with builders, I mean, look, there's always, I don't know how you describe it. Try that, like, you ever have like a water balloon and you squeeze a water balloon, right? And like it shoots out the sides, right? Yeah. So like recessions are like that in a way, right? You're squeezing, the middle is getting squeezed, but there's little bubbles popping up outside that are resulting from the squeeze itself.
I like that. Okay.
One of those is home building, because there are people who are just like, now's the time to get out of the city, now's the time to get out of my apartment.
Yep.
What I've been hearing is that you cannot buy a house in New Jersey right now.
Oh yeah, I've heard the same thing. I've had people on this channel going, I'm trying to get out of New York, go to New Jersey. Nothing's available. Everything's pending.
You can't find a house for love or money in New Jersey at the moment, and I'm assuming it's the same in the New York suburbs as well.
Oh, for sure. I'm sure.
On the New York State side, because everyone's decided now is the time to buy a house. And so obviously if you're a home builder, that's great because that's helping you too. Like people are like, so the home builders are feeling good, the realtors are feeling good, but this shouldn't be confused with like the economy is good.
No,
right?
I agree.
Yeah. But I think a lot of people are, I mean, and obviously it has a good economic effect in that limited area, right? So obviously construction workers are working.
A little bit more employment, a little bit this, that.
Right. But it's not the same thing as a house buying boom because everybody's got a lot of money in their pocket.
Right.
It's a house buying boom because people are scared and they're thinking, boy, if I don't buy now, I'll be stuck in the city with this horrible COVID. And also I'm going to miss out on buying a house because it's going to.
That is exactly where I wanted to go with this is I've seen this before. I remember 05, 04, 05, 06. And I think we're right in the beginning of that, where people start talking in their little circle and they're going to say, hey, I got this great house in New Jersey or whatever, pick said suburb. And that conversation is going to go and go and go. And the fear of missing out or FOMO is going to carry new home construction for at least 6 to 8 quarters. Which again, it's a net positive, but it's a nit, but I think it's going to happen.
But if you're a house flipper, now is a good time for you.
Absolutely.
If you can find product, right? Because I actually just got an email from a family office that I'm friendly with that does a lot of private lending, and I got their blast email, which is essentially like, hey, home flippers, like we're open for business, like come get your money.
Yeah.
And there's a limited window, like this is, and they know like this is going to happen for maybe a year before this phenomenon wears off. But like if you have the infrastructure and you're set up to go, as a home flipper, boy, I mean, you're going to have a good next 12 months.
Yeah. It's going to be 12 to 18 months. Cause again, it will build, right? This is the little early stages, and then friends talk to friends, and then pretty soon it's overheated. So, and then we get into 2021 and the real pain begins. I think there's more pain in the commercial paper market. I think there's a lot REITs are going to go bankrupt or whatever the equivalent is for a REIT. There's just a lot of pain that nobody's talking about.
Well, listen, I mean, we just still, like you said, the stimulus money just put everything on hold essentially.
Yeah. Delay.
And we didn't whip COVID when we had the chance, and so now we're paying the price. And look, maybe we're in the new world, we're in the modern monetary theory world where we just like print forever and it doesn't matter, and I mean, where does that leave us? I think it causes some really big problems with price discovery and knowing what stuff is worth. But maybe that is the point at which you do really just give in and say you can't fight the Fed. Like I've always resisted you can't fight the Fed thing, because I always felt like it can always be turned off or it can always stop working. At some point. Like there's a point at which it just that the next round of stimulus doesn't work. Oh, this is a great thing stat I just read. So the effectiveness of additional monetary stimulus is waning.
I'm sure.
It now takes $4. Sorry, $4 of $4. It takes $4. And I was just doing math with my 7-year-old, so I was like,
that 4 3.
Yeah. So it now takes $4 of debt to create $1 of economic activity.
Oh,
which is
Jesus.
Which is ridiculous, right? I mean, so every time we load up on more debt, used to have a great multiplier effect, 40 years ago, right?
Sure.
Now, then it was you were creating like several dollars of economic activity for every $1 of debt.
Correct. Yep.
But now it's flipped. So at some point it doesn't work anymore at all, right?
Yeah.
And that's the point that we have to be concerned about. I mean, we really, I think as a country, we really need, when this is all over, to think about, biting the bullet and having some serious austerity for a couple of years to try to get the debt down to a manageable level. And because, we should have COVID, just go into deep freeze for 6 weeks and just bite the bullet and get it over with. But we didn't do that. We had a bunch of idiots with guns refuse to wear masks to Walmart, right? I mean, all that insanity. We should have just, I'm sure those guys are happy now that like their bars are closing again, right? And they're not going to be able to get haircuts again. It's all their fault, frankly. But like the, we should have just bit the bullet for 6 weeks and be like, New Zealand and,
Taiwan,
Taiwan, a lot of Europe. Even look at Italy. I mean, Italy, and everybody's out drinking in cafes again because they beat COVID, and here we are. We're stuck with this. Yeah. So we didn't do it then, but we're going to have to do it at some point. We're going to have to just say, look, we're going to just deal with some pain for 12 months or 2 years, and bite the bullet. But I just don't see it happening. But that's what
I don't see it happening. You can't shut the economy down again.
Well, it's not shutting the economy down, but it's austerity, right?
Austerity. I'm sorry. Flip. Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally agree.
When we beat COVID, when finally this runs its course, but I mean, who knows how at this point? Who knows how long it's going to last? Oh, and then just one last point. I think one thing that people are not really focused on right now is that international travel between the United States and everywhere else is basically shut down.
Correct.
And it's going to be shut down until the U.S. deals with the COVID problem.
As it should be.
Because nobody's letting Americans in or letting their people go to the U.S. to go get infected and come back.
Exactly.
And I mean, what's the economic impact of that? Like, how many billions and billions of dollars come into the U.S. economy every year through foreign tourism?
Yep.
And then the airlines, taking Americans overseas to travel too. And so it's that's just a huge hit. And I don't know, nobody seems to be talking about this, but that alone, even if everything else goes back to normal, that alone is going to have a significant impact on the economy. And, millions of jobs are at stake from that by itself. So, anybody who says that we're just back home after we open things up is just not. They're not thinking about this right. So.
Yeah, I'm in the camp with you. We've come out of the worst of it. Clearly March, April is going to be the worst of it, but we're nowhere back to where we were, and it's going to be the L or the Nike swoosh or whatever you want to call it. Right. I've come to think that there's an asset price return, which again, stock market, real estate, V-shape, hard to argue, right? We're already setting records in the S&P and NASDAQ. I think there's an economic recovery, which is going to be a swoosh or an L or whatever you want to call it. But then I think there's people, and I believe there's individuals, you and I think it's going to be a K-shaped recovery, right? We went down, and then there's going to be winners and losers. Mm-hmm. And so that's how there's not one recovery. There's the stock market, there's the economic engine of the U.S., and then there's people.
Yeah.
And I think everybody's going to recover different.
And I think also, like if you're looking at the stock market versus real estate, the difference between the two of those is that stocks, a lot of people invest in stocks never expecting to get paid any dividends at all. They're just investing. It's purely a capital gains play, right? And a lot of people are investing right now with the idea of, well, everyone else is investing, so I want to essentially front run them
FOMO,
and make money, right? So I want to get in there before everyone else does. And like that, some people can do it.
Yeah, it works for a little while.
It works for a little while, but it doesn't, like the underlying. That's why like you can't fight the Fed thing can sort of work in the stock market, and where things can become completely disassociated from the underlying economic reality.
Agreed.
Because they're not expecting to get paid a dividend anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But in real estate, you have two problems. One is that for cash flow, and two, you have debt you got to pay.
Yeah.
So at some point, you can keep on saying, "Oh well, interest rates are low, and it's all about the spread between the cap rate and the interest rate." The problem is you could invest at, you could buy, interest rates could go to zero. Or, we get to the point where basically banks are giving their money to you for free because they're borrowing it at negative interest rates, right? And they're making their spread that way. Let's just say that, pose that as an example. You could still get into default, right? Because you could still be in a situation where if your income drops, you can't pay back that principal and you're only on the hook for principal, right?
Yeah.
At that point. So, but that just because you're buying at a cap rate and you have a spread, you're not locking the spread in. You're just hoping that the spread stays that way or underwater. You can't. And so that is ultimately why it's not completely disassociated from economic reality the way that stocks can. Because unless you're buying stocks on margin, you don't have this problem. And but all real estate is bought on margin, essentially, right? It's all bought on debt, and you have to be able to repay the debt. So if unemployment spikes, if real unemployment, not what we've got now where everyone's getting paid, to not work, but real unemployment spikes, real economic activity drops, it's going to ripple through to real estate. And
totally agree.
And the pain will be felt. So don't get ahead of yourselves. Looking at the stock market or whatever and saying, oh, your asset prices, and you could lose everything still, right? If you can't pay your mortgage.
Totally agree.
That's the thing to be careful of.
Well, Jonathon, thank you very much for this. As always, a highlight of the week. I look forward to next week where we go back and look at your event and talk about what happened there. So that should be a fun conversation as well. Thanks, man.